The Unfettered Mind, the tale of the Zen master and the swordsman. In the heart of ancient Japan, there existed a tension between two seemingly opposing worlds, the deadly precision of the warrior and the serene detachment of the monk. These two worlds were symbolized by two men, both at the peak of their respective disciplines. Takuan Soho, a Zen monk, lived a life of solitude in a small temple nestled among the mist-covered mountains of Edo. His robes, worn and simple, were a reflection of his inner life, a life free from the burdens of ego, ambition, and fear. Takuan had long walked the path of enlightenment, but he was no stranger to the affairs of the world. His reputation as a wise and unorthodox Zen master had reached the ears of many, including those far beyond the temple walls. One of those who sought Takuan's wisdom was Yagyu Munenori, the master swordsman of the Yagyu clan. Yagyu was a man of immense skill, his sword cutting with the precision of a lightning strike, his movements flowing like water. As the instructor to the shogun himself, Yagyu had honed his technique to the highest level. But with each step forward in his mastery, a new question arose in his heart. Could the blade ever be wielded without attachment, without fear? Could there be a sword that cuts through not only flesh, but the illusions of the mind? It was with these questions that Yagyu made the arduous journey to Takuan's temple, carrying within him not only his formidable sword, but also the weight of his doubts. A visitor in the mist of morning was cloaked in a soft haze as Yagyu approached the temple. The sound of his footfalls, muffled by the damp earth, echoed through the stillness. The temple, perched on the edge of a cliff, seemed to blend with the very clouds themselves. Here, the world seemed to pause, time stretched, and the boundaries between man and nature blurred. As Yagyu reached the temple gates, he saw Takuan sweeping the stone path with the calm, methodical movements of one deeply at peace with the world. The monk's eyes, half closed in meditation, gave no indication that he had noticed Yagyu's approach. Yagyu stopped a few paces away, bowing deeply. Master Takuan, I am Yagyu Munenori. I have come to seek your guidance. Without stopping his sweeping, Takuan responded, his voice as soft as the breeze. A swordsman seeks a monk? Strange times indeed. Yagyu's eyes did not waver. I have reached the limits of my understanding in the way of the sword. My skill is great, but my mind remains fettered by fear, by doubt, by the attachment to victory and defeat. Takuan's broom stilled, and he turned to face Yagyu. His gaze was piercing yet tranquil, like a still pond that reflects the entire sky. You carry with you a heavy burden, Master Yagyu. Tell me, what do you wish to achieve? Yagyu paused, searching for the words. I wish to wield the sword without fear, to strike without hesitation, without attachment. I seek a mind that is like water, fluid, formless, yet unstoppable. Takuan smiled faintly. A mind like water? Then you must learn to be empty, to move without moving, to act without acting. But first, tell me, what is it you fear? Yagyu hesitated, then spoke, his voice quiet. Death, failure, the shame of defeat. In battle, these fears weigh heavily on me. Takuan nodded, gesturing for Yagyu to follow him. Come, let us sit and speak of the sword and the mind. The sword that cuts through our illusion. They walked together in silence to a quiet corner of the temple, where the only sound was the occasional rustling of bamboo leaves in the wind. The two men sat on the ground, facing each other, the tension of their meeting dissipating like mist in the morning sun. Takuan began slowly, his words deliberate. You say you wish to wield the sword without fear, but to do so, you must first understand the nature of the mind that holds the sword. The mind that clings, that attaches itself to victory or defeat, is like a flame in the wind. It flickers, it is unstable, and it is easily extinguished. To truly master the sword, your mind must be unfettered, free from the grasp of both fear and desire. Yagyu listened intently, but the words seemed distant, like echoes in a vast cave. How can one act without desire? Without the will to win, Does not the sword lose its purpose? Takuan's eyes glimmered with a hidden depth. The sword is a tool. Its purpose is neither to win nor to lose, it simply cuts. Your attachment to winning is what blinds you. You fear defeat because you are attached to success, but in truth, both are illusions. Yagyu furrowed his brow. Illusions? What do you mean? Takuan leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering. Victory and defeat exist only in the mind. When you step into a duel, your mind begins to race, anticipating, calculating, fearing. But the blade does not think, it moves in the moment. It is only your mind that creates the distinctions between winning and losing. A true swordsman moves without these distinctions. He does not fight for victory or out of fear of defeat. He simply acts. Yagyu's mind struggled to grasp the monk's meaning, his thoughts swirling like leaves in a storm. But in a duel, one must win or lose. How can you say they are illusions? Takuan smiled again, this time with the warmth of a teacher gently guiding a student toward a new understanding. Imagine two mirrors placed face to face. They reflect each other infinitely, but what do they show? Nothing. Only an endless reflection of the other. Victory and defeat are like those mirrors, endless reflections of the self. The true mind, the mind of Zen, sees beyond these reflections. It moves without hesitation because it is free from the illusions that bind it. The unfettered mind. As the days passed, Yagyu remained at the temple, engaged in long discussions with Takuan and in periods of quiet contemplation. The monk's teachings were often enigmatic, their meanings elusive, but slowly, like a blade being sharpened on a whetstone, Yagyu began to see glimpses of what Takuan was pointing toward. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Takuan invited Yagyu to walk with him again, this time to a clearing near the edge of a cliff. Below them, the valley spread out like a sea of shadows, the distant sounds of the village fading into the silence of the approaching night. Takuan handed Yagyu a wooden training sword. "Strike me," he said simply. Yagyu blinked in surprise. "I cannot, master. I would not dare." Takuan's expression remained calm. "Strike me, but do not hesitate. Do not fear." Yagyu gripped the sword tightly, his heart pounding. He had sparred countless times before, faced life and death duels. But now, standing before this unarmed monk, he hesitated. His mind filled with questions, doubts. Takuan's voice cut through the haze of his thoughts. "You hesitate because your mind is bound. You fear harming me, you fear failing, you fear judgment. All these fears are illusions, Yagyu. Let them go. Strike, not to win or lose, but to act." Taking a deep breath, Yagyu raised the wooden sword. For a moment, he felt the weight of all his training, all his fears and desires, pressing down on him. But then, in a moment of clarity, he let it all go. His mind emptied. The sword moved. Before he realized it, the strike was over. The wooden blade had cut through the air, missing Takuan by a hair. The monk stood unmoved, a serene smile on his face. "You see?" Takuan said softly. In that moment, there was no hesitation, no fear, no desire. Your mind was free, and the sword moved as it should. This is the unfettered mind, a mind that is not bound by the illusions of victory and defeat, of self and other. It simply is. Yagyu lowered the sword, his breath steady, his mind calm. For the first time, he understood. The sword, like life itself, was not something to be controlled or conquered. It was to be lived, fully, without attachment, without fear. The return to the sword. Yagyu left the temple some weeks later, carrying with him not just his sword, but the teachings of the Zen master. The path of the warrior had not changed, but his relationship to it had. He now understood that mastery of the sword was not merely about technique or skill, but about the mastery of the self, the letting go of all that binds the mind. In the years that followed, Yagyu became even more renowned for his unmatched swordsmanship. But those who faced him in battle would often speak of a strange and disquieting presence when they crossed blades with him. It was as if Yagyu no longer fought for victory or survival. His movements were effortless, his strikes devoid of hesitation, as if his sword was guided by something beyond the material world. Many came to call him the swordsman who had no fear, but Yagyu knew the truth. He had not defeated fear, he had simply let go of it, like a cloud that drifts away in the wind. His mind, like water, was free, formless, and boundless. And as for Takuan, he remained in his mountain temple, a quiet presence in the world, teaching those who sought his wisdom that the true battle was not against an opponent, but against the self. His writings, passed down through generations, became known as the Unfettered Mind, a guide not just for warriors, but for all who sought to live without the chains of illusion. Epilogue: The Eternal Echo. The tale of Takuan and Yagyu is one that echoes through time, a reminder that the most profound battles are fought within. Whether one wields a sword or walks the path of the monk, the lessons of the unfettered mind remain: to live without attachment, to act without hesitation, and to see through the illusions that bind us all. For in the end, victory and defeat are but passing shadows on the path to true freedom. And the mind, once unfettered, moves like the wind, untouchable, unbreakable, and free.